International Women's Day. So where did it root from? It roots back from 1908 or 1909 when 15,000 women marched on the streets of New York City demanding voting rights, better pay and shorter working hours. It's been 110 years to date where finally women are being heard. We're using tools such as social media, talking to people, educating people about how we can make a difference, and that's what it's about, making a difference, bridging a gap between men and women. It goes back in terms of our Sikh culture, where our gurus made sure that men and women were on equal footing, and that's what we're striving for today.
Today on International Women's Day, we mustn't forget the ultimate sacrifices that Sikh women have made. Such as Mai Bhago, who led 40 Sikh soldiers against the Mughals in 1705. Bibi Nanaki, the elder sister of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, also known as the first Gursikh. The very brave Mata Gujari, who nurtured the Chote Sahibzade. Mata Kiwi, the first Sikh preacher who emerged from the traditional confinement of Indian household. She liberated the women and led them freely to participate in the Langar Maryada. And we can't forget the mother of Khalsa, Mata Sahib Kaur. These are just some of the great women that make our Sikh history. Now, on International Women's Day 2018, let's meet some inspirational Sikh women of our time. On this International Women's Day, we're very, very lucky that we're joined by the inspirational Preet Kaur Shergill Bajwa from the West Midlands Fire Service. Firstly, can you just tell us a little bit about your role in the West Midlands Fire Service?
Vaheguru Ji da Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji di Fateh. Thank you, Suki, for this absolutely fantastic opportunity. So my role at the West Midlands Fire Service is of strategic enabler for business development. And in layman's terms, our strategic team is, it's our senior management team or directors team, so to say. Our role is to advise the Chief Fire Officer on all issues regarding the fire service, the running of the fire service, alongside my functional role, which is that of business development, to create funding around new services that we can deliver in the communities.
When we think about the fire service, we predominantly think it's a male-orientated role, because you always hear the firemen, you don't sort of hear firewomen. What sort of spurred you on to get, into this career? Was there anything that put you off, or did you think, this is something that I want to do?
You're right. Fireman Sam has done us a lot of damage. It is a career that predominantly men tend to go for, but you'd be surprised that we have a lot of women firefighters, in fact, at all different ranks across the organisation. In the last few years, we've done a lot to drive that promotion ladder because we haven't been able to recruit as much. But West Midlands Fire Service has, last time I counted, about 80 odd firefighters that are frontline female staff. So, and actually, they have different skills and abilities to save somebody that perhaps a man doesn't. For instance, confined spaces, a woman's body can fit into a confined space and rescue someone. So there's real advantages, but there's nothing that a woman can't do that a man can do. And it's just about, just as there's diversity in men, all men aren't the same, there's diversity in women, So, yes, it is unfortunately one of those services where it is still predominantly white, male dominated. And we have been working a great deal to readdress that balance. In terms of personally what's inspired me, if I'm really honest, hand on heart, I've always been somebody, for some reason when it comes to work, thought when they're asking for 10 things, what normally happens on an application form, a woman looks at it and thinks, oh, I haven't got that one and that one, so I won't apply. Yeah. Whereas a man thinks, I've only got 1 or 2, but I'll give it a go anyway. So I guess my thinking has been probably more like men. Yeah. You know, I've looked at the application form and thought, oh, I'll give it a go, you know. And that's really helped my career. But when I first sort of moved into Birmingham, it was because I wanted to come back and see my mum more. I'd been in London for several years. So I wanted to be closer to family. Like everybody else, you kind of go out in the world and come back home. Yeah. And with God's grace, you know, I managed to settle down. I'm married now. And, you know, my inspiration working West Midlands Fire Service was very much about, I've always wanted to serve the community.
Now, Preet, I know you've also won a lot of awards as well, which is truly inspirational. Not only that you're the only female Sikh lady on the board as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Thank you very much for embarrassing me. Yes, I have won. I've been lucky enough to win a lot of awards. And a lot of my work, particularly the early years, was around equality and diversity. I worked with, for instance, one of my first awards was working with private sector companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Beecham's, you know, Mars, Confectionery. And it was getting them to address their equality policies and making a commitment to equality and diversity. And that was recognised nationally. And we won the RAF and the Army to get that one. More recent awards have been around change management, you know, bringing change to the sector. My award last year was for being the leading BME person within the fire sector, which was a real honour. You know, it was celebrating you know, what we've achieved. And I say we because it's never one person. But yes, and I believe I am the only Sikh woman nationally on a fire service board. There aren't many women on boards. We're very lucky. Again, it's the vision of our Chief Fire Officer who wanted more diversity in the boardroom. So there's 14 of us, of which 3 are women. And yeah, it's a great honour.
Some people may have the perception that you have to change your identity to reach the top. What would you say? Have you had to change your identity, would you feel, to get where you are today?
I can write a book about this. I think, in fact, I might just. Actually, I'm speaking in about a month's time, and I do try and speak around the issue as much as I can. I'm speaking at Asian Fire Service National Conference in a few weeks' time, talking about breaking barriers and overcoming kind of obstacles to get to where you need to. And I really sincerely think that's the biggest mistake as girls, women make. And I remember, you know, not that long ago, that, you know, we sit there and we start comparing ourselves, you know, and, oh, she's got this, he's got that. They must be very lucky to be able to get that. Oh, no, those opportunities aren't open to me. And I think all of that thinking is what stops us. And for me, it hasn't been that I didn't have all of those doubts, but I've had to overcome it, you know, rise myself above it. So I would say to any young woman watching this, don't listen to that voice inside of you. Listen to the one that says, I can, you know, let me give it a go. You know, try and pursue things. Don't be fearful of pursuing things. What's the worst that can happen? You know, you might, you know, have a blockage and pull back and then you'll get back up again, you know. But in terms of identity, no. I mean, I'm really... You know, I'm obviously not Amritdhari, but I am very close to my religion. I practice Sikhi as best as I can. I try and go to the Gurdwara. I pray in the mornings. But it's beyond that, isn't it? Sikhi is about values. It's about how we engage with people. And for me, I would say to young people, try and look at the meaning of what our Gurbani says. If nothing else, just the first, Japji Sahib's first Ikumkar, you know, to Nirpo Nirvera Kal Murtha Juni Seven Guru Prasad Jap. Just the meaning of that is about equality, it's about being fearless, it's about looking at God as a energy that's within all of us. And that's about respecting each other, you know. And so to me, it's about, you don't have to give one or the other. The other thing I would say is about, in terms of identity, is the fact that, you know, I'm really homely at home, you know. I get in the kitchen, I like making the roti, I like the family get-togethers, you know, I love that stuff. And of course, you know, as you move upwards, or if your roles are demanding, and, you know, I know that people have children and it gets demanding, it gets harder, but try and make time for it all, because at the end of the day, life is short. You know, only get one chance at it. So have fun, take people with you, and be part of your community.
And can you just tell us what International Women's Day means for you? And is there a particular woman that inspires you?
International Women's Day for me is about reflection. It's a moment to reflect on myself. Am I doing enough? You know, and I do aspire to do more outside of my role. You know, sometimes the role the family takes up time, and I like, for instance, I like to mentor young women. So I'm being part of the Mayor's mentoring team. I'm hoping to write something which is about overcoming barriers within careers. So, you know, it's about kind of, am I doing enough to give back? That's really important. So it's good reflection for myself. If you look at our history is made upon the sacrifices of our women. You know, so if you look at Sikhi from, Guru Gobind Singh Ji's mom, you know, who looked after the Sabjade, you know, if you look at women in terms of the sacrifices they gave, you know, it's hugely inspirational. And our religion is based on equality. You know, isn't that great? It's one of the basic in fundamentals of our religion, and all we need to do is be open to it. You know, I know that for a lot of young people, sometimes, you know, just the Roop of Sikhi becomes a barrier. Yeah. But actually, you know, be like me then. Yeah. Do as much as you can. You know, try and get your values right. Try and get your engagement right. Understand the principles and the pillars of it. Try and live your life by it. That's half the battle. And of course, you know, I think once you start going on that pathway, you become more inspired, you know, so you become more engaged. I go to the Gurdwara, and if I miss it for a few weeks, everyone's like, where have you been? You know, there's a community there. So there's a lot of love in our community, and I think it's about accessing that. In terms of who inspires me, my mum, you know. And my mum inspires me. I know there's a lot of women in history who've achieved lots, you know, and I probably will be here all day and night if I tried to cite any one woman. But sometimes it's the people that are around you, the real heroes, that we don't recognise their sacrifices. My mum's made a lot of sacrifices for us children, to get us educated, to get us settled, to give us good values, and to tune us into Sikhi. So for me, I'm forever grateful to you, Mum, if you're watching. And you know, we're really blessed. Our family kind of is all surrounded by Mum, you know, and a cooking. So, you know, so that's great.
Hi guys, we've now come to West Midlands Custody Service, where we're about to meet another truly inspirational Sikh lady. With us, we have Sundeep Ko. So Sundeep, thank you firstly very much for taking the time out and speaking to us today, because I know you're a very busy lady. So can you just tell us a little bit about your career and how you got into the police force?
Okay, so I joined in 2003. I was in a very fortunate position in 2002 to become a special constable with West Mids Police. Studied in a completely different field. Wasn't quite sure if I was going to continue in that path, so hence why I became a special. And the whole reason behind that was about, number one, finding out if the role was potentially for me, and number two, to give back. And that's quite significant, certainly for myself, to try and help people. So yeah, following on the back of that, I joined, and 15 years on, I'm still in the career. Very rewarding role. Obviously, it can be frustrating at times, but ultimately, it's very challenging. But the biggest thing for me is the fact that I'm coming to work and I'm helping people, whether that's our victims of crime or whether that's offenders sometimes. Obviously, in the role that I'm in now, is part of a prisoner intervention prevention team. So we look at offenders that have committed crime for the first instance or are very low-level offenders and try and put them on a rehabilitation pathway with a view to recognise attitudes and thinking about offending, trying to stop that ultimately, and also for them to understand the impact of that to victims. And obviously it's quite important in conjunction with the victims to understand that we're both on the same path. Obviously some people don't want people prosecuted, and ultimately some offences won't go to court, but trying to find a mutual balance in terms of, number one, how can we help the victim, and then number two, how can we help the offender from reoffending.
As a woman, have you faced any challenges with your role? Because you can see the police force sometimes being predominantly a male-orientated role. So it'd be interesting to know if you have faced any challenges.
Personally, no. And I think I'm very lucky in terms of that. Obviously, historically, the police service was a male-orientated role, wasn't it? You know, and the hardships that women have faced to get into a role where you're actively on the streets. I know that I haven't, but I do know that there are sort of services internally that we can speak to. Should we, ascertain a problem, whether that's subject to a complaint or whether it's discrimination within the organisation. There are, services. Fortunately, we've got the Sikh Police Association, that we can go to, where we've got mentors and coaches there, and people that are probably in a little bit of more a senior role, a senior role, or the fact that they've got the experience behind them and the context to try and sort of first contact advisors is what they would call them. But there are departments or people we can go to address those sort of problems should they arise. But it's a learning culture, isn't it? We come across hardships across the way, but they can be resolved. It's just about communicating successfully. It's a good organisation to work for, and the challenges are faced amongst most people, but no, I haven't, and I think I'm just lucky in that aspect.
So what does International Women's Day mean for you?
International Day, for me, it's a reminder of the hardships that were faced, obviously, by our ancestors back in the day, and a reflection of how far we've come. Importantly for me, it's that I'm now in a very fortunate position to be in a role that was previously male-orientated, male-dominated. So I'm very, very lucky in that aspect. In addition to that, it's albeit it's one day, nationally or internationally, the 8th of March, where people are coming in to collectively get together, whether it's women, employers, businesses, to reflect on, the successes, the achievements of women within their industry, but also to recognise changes that are still yet to come. Obviously, as we're ever evolving, people have got different needs, people have got different skills, and some organisations really don't adapt to those or are not in a position because perhaps they don't have the understanding. So it's about empowering those women to change the attitudes, to change the thinking.
So that leads me nicely on to the next question. Who's inspired you?
So for me, obviously, when I said earlier, it was 2003 I joined. Back in 2002, I became a special. At that time, I spoke to my cousin, who's a sergeant, Hodgin the Chima, based at Willen Hall in Walsall. He was already in the role. And it was a moment of clarity where it's like, well, okay, if he can do it, I'm sure I can do it too. And at the time, there weren't that many Asian females that I could go to sort of have a conversation about the role itself. So with my own motivation and my own drive, I then decided, hold on, I can apply for this. So obviously, not to the liking of my parents, shall we say, to start off with, but that has come along down the way, and we've progressed past that stage, shall we say, 15 years later. But ultimately, it was him. It was about, well, he's a male, he can do it. I'm a female, I can equally do the same, and I can make a success of it. And the key thing there, it's important, is that for the future generations, obviously, being a role model, aspiring people that they can do it, there's no limitations. We often find there's key roles that people want us to work within the field of, becoming a doctor, becoming an accountant, a lawyer, etc., etc. But if we don't target careers where there's a need, we're never going to progress. And to be ultimately a role model in a field that is public-facing, and the diverse of communities that we serve, you need to have known, culturally informative people within the roles, and they can equally be, aspiring to young girls, young boys. It's not gender limited.
हाँ जी, मेरा नाम मंजीत कौर है और मैं नेट वेस्ट बैंक ले काम करती हूँ। मैंने हो गया तकरीबन कई साल हो गया, 27 years इस साल पूरे कीते ने ते इस समय दे विच काफ़ी कई इदां दी मौके भी मिले आ अपने आप नू साबित करन लई, कई इनाम भी मिले आ। And काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग रहा है path. So day job दे नाल मैं vice president या Asian Business Chamber of Commerce दी भी. So काफ़ी मेरे ख्याल हो गया साल रोल है करती हूँ. So काफ़ी interesting career ਰਿਹਾ so yeah it's been good.
So ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਟਾਰਟਿੰਗ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਲਾਈਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਬੈਂਕ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਉਮਰ 'ਚ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਸੀਗੀ
ਕਿੰਨੀ ਏਜ ਸੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ
17 years 17 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਉਮਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੋ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਾਫੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਈ ਕਾਫੀ ਕਲੈਰੀਕਲ ਜੌਬਸ ਕੀਤੇ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਲੈਣ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਫੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਈ ਕਈ ਸਾਲ ਵੀ ਲੱਗ ਗਏ ਐਂਡ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਰਿਸਪੈਕਟ ਵੀ ਬਣੀ ਆ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਆ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਸੇਵਾ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਰਾਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਛੋਟੀ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਪੈਸੇ ਲੈਂਡ ਕਰਨੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਮਕਾਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ ਦੇਣਾ ਐਡਵਾਈਸ ਦੇਣੀ ਸੋ ਕਾਫੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨੀ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਸੈਟਅਪ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਜੀ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਰੀਲੀ ਜਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਅਚੀਵ ਕਰੀਦਾ ਵੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਈਜ਼ੀ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਦੀ ਕਦਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਨਾਲ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਦੋਂ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲੇ ਉਹੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਤੇ ਹੋਵੋ ਅਤੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਰੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਆਲੇ ਦੁਆਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦੀਆਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰੈਸ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਸੰਗਤ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਘਟੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇੱਕ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਫੇਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮੈਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੁਣ ਜਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਚੁੱਕਣੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਮਟਾਈਮਸ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮੇਲ ਕੋਲੀਗਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚੈਲੰਜਿਸ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਇੱਕ ਮਾਂ ਹੋਣ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਈ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੁਣ ਨਾ ਠੀਕ ਹੋਣ ਯੂ ਟੇਕ ਅ ਡੇ ਆਫ ਐਂਡ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੀਗਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕਈ ਚੈਲੰਜਿਸ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਦੇਖੀਆਂ ਆ ਕਰੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਕਸ ਕਰੀਏ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੈਲਿਊਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਬਰਕਰਾਰ ਰੱਖੀਏ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਸੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਪਬ੍ਰਿੰਗਿੰਗ ਆ ਸਿੱਖ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨਾਲ ਬਿਲੋਂਗ ਕਰੀਦਾ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੈਲਿਊਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਪਰੋਮਾਈਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਰਕਰਾਰ ਰੱਖੀਏ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਪਰੋਮਾਈਜ਼ ਨਾ ਕਰੀਏ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਵੂਮੈਨਸ ਡੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਖਾਸ ਦਿਨ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬੈਂਕ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਵੈਂਟਸ ਵੀ ਕਰੀਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੂਮੈਨ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲਣ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਵੀ ਕਰਨ ਅਤੇ ਇੰਪਾਵਰ ਵੀ ਹੋਣ ਅਤੇ ਇੰਸਪਾਇਰ ਹੋਣ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਤੋਂ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੱਕ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਦਿਨ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰੇਟ ਕਰੀਏ ਨਾਲੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਨੇ ਬ੍ਰਿਲੀਅੰਟ ਰੋਲ ਮਾਡਲਸ ਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਫਰੋਮ ਦ ਗੁਰੂਜ਼ ਟਾਈਮਸ ਹੈ ਨਾ to even modern times ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ I think it's very important ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕਰੀਏ ਅਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਗੁੱਡ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵ ਰੋਲ ਮਾਡਲਸ ਹੋਣ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਵੈਲਿਊਜ਼ ਨਾਲ compromise ਨਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਵੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ
Okay, my name's Raji Kulabraya and I'm a systems engineering consultant. That's a role I started in January where I'm looking after combined cycle gas turbines. Prior to that I was working at E.ON for 7.5 years and my last role was working on a wind farm which is an offshore wind farm called Rampion in Brighton and there I was the IT project manager. So that involved working on all the applications in the control room, making sure that all the coordination in the site was working correctly, bringing back data from the site, and overall the day-to-day running of the actual plant itself. Initially I did. there are always a few challenges in your day-to-day role, but initially I think the biggest challenge was it's such a dominated environment, which is a male-dominated environment. When I started in 2011, even then it was quite difficult as a woman to join such a male-orientated team. My team consisted of, I think it was 34 people and only 2 girls. So 32 men and just 2 of us girls working there. So it was a little bit challenging, but over the years I've seen a vast change on the perception of people and actually being more diverse in a working environment. I think the initial thing is your family support, so that's my support mechanism. So I would turn to my parents, my mom, my siblings, my sisters. But additionally to that, it would be looking at, going to the Gurdwara, somewhere I found peace. So I go to the Gurdwara on every Monday in the week, just to recharge. Everyone has their own little recharge. That's my little recharge, where I just look for a little bit more support, have a little conversation with God, and it just empowers me to, want to drive forward. I would want to say that if you do sometimes feel that you're, as a woman, afraid to break the glass ceiling, then you can think back to Mata Gujri and think about all the hardships she faced. Whereas we're in a time now where we can have that voice, whereas back then voices were suppressed. And then you can also look to your parents for that support mechanism and just think that, from the culture we come from and where we've come today, Sikh people are known and renowned for their peaceful attitude, their drive, their successes. So if you need to take, some sort of inspiration, then you don't really need to look too far from outside your own home and your own faith, really. So just keep ploughing forward and look for what drives you to be successful, and don't feel that any gender equality, any form of diversity is something that should be a reason to stop you. I know hundreds of women now that are working in IT, working in engineering. I've done some lectures at Coventry University, and every year they have a Women in Engineering lecture. People from NASA, Rolls-Royce, E.ON, different women who are working in engineering come together to give the students an insight that the world is your oyster. So everything is open to you, and you need to find deep-rooted within you what pushes you to drive forward. Now, that might be something different for different people, but for me, that's my faith and my family.
We've heard the stories of our fellow sisters today.
I would say that hold on to yourself.
All women, you are valued.
Never to hold yourselves back.
Believe in yourself.
They have used the word impossible. I'm possible. They've made that difference.
But whatever you do, achieve against all odds, but with integrity.
Be yourself.
Even an arrow has to go backwards in order for it to shoot forward.
So let's all empower one another.
Go for it. You've got nothing to lose.
From achieving your dreams and ambitions.
They have shown that the obstacles, the hardships, the battles that they have faced have proved nothing but strength.
Have confidence and have a can-do attitude. Anything in life, think I can.
Make that change.
Let's stand together.
Be inspired, inspire others.
I hope that the stories that have been shared with you today give you the courage to bridge that gap, to make that difference, because there isn't any inequality in Sikhi.
And I wish you all happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.
Wish everybody watching a happy International Women's Day. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.